Death Battle's coming back soon, so now feels like a good a time as any to get around to this video that I've had on the back burner for a while now. I started the first draft of this in mid-2023 I think, and then scrapped it for like a year. But I'm going to be ranking all 100 plus custom tracks they've ever done. From the first 10 seasons anyway. As of recording this, which is about 9 days before the YouTube premiere of Omni-Man vs Bardock, we don't have that episode's track yet, and I'm not going to add anything last minute. Galactus vs Unicron was the cutoff point, anything after that will not count. So don't go telling me in the comments I've forgotten anything, because I promise you I haven't. I've double triple checked everything. I have all 118 tracks. Recording this bit after because I realised I should clarify, I'm not including Off Bandicoot or Sea Salt Ice Cream on the list. I didn't forget those, it was a conscious choice to not include them. I have basically no opinion on either of them beyond they set the atmosphere they need to well. I'll keep this intro as short as I can, but basically Death Battle's been actively straying away from using copyrighted music from the end of season 4 onwards. So every episode since Thor vs Wonder Woman, plus a few from before, has had a custom backing track made for the animation. Normally by Brandon Yates and or Therewolf Media, but some here and there do feature other guests or are done by other musicians entirely. And now I'm gonna rank all of them from my least favourite to my favourite. Not quite what Brandon asked me to do a while ago, because I don't think I have the capacity to remember and rank his 20 Gorgillion commission songs, but hey, I hope he likes this anyway if he happens to see it. There are two main factors I'm considering for this: how much I like listening to a song on its own, and how much I think it adds to its episodes. Most of my favourites do both, but there are some that knock it so far out of the park in one of those categories that the other basically becomes irrelevant and I end up ranking it super high anyway. A few other quick clarifications to get out of the way. I've had no substantial musical training, so don't expect me to critique the compositions of the songs as if I'd have any clue what I'm talking about. This is all based on how much I personally enjoy each song. This also means that I am inevitably going to misidentify a musical term, genre, or instrument. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and I will not know until the video comes out and it will be pointed out to me in the comments. So I apologise in advance. I've tried double checking everything just to make sure, but I don't doubt that something will have slipped through the cracks. And remember that my thoughts on a track do not always mirror my thoughts on an episode. There are some episodes I dislike that have tracks that rank fairly high, and some of my all-time favourite episodes have music that didn't even crack the top half. But it's impossible for me to completely 100% remove my feelings on an episode from the song, because my musical taste isn't so much beholden to any specific genre, more so the memories and associations I have with a song. If I hear something and remember a thing I like, that will help it somewhat, while I'm more likely to be bored of something that accompanies 3 minutes of nothing happening. It's not the main factor in the rankings by any means, but it will still play a role. Another last minute addition I should add here, recorded the following week. A lot of this list is very interchangeable, so if a track is ranked within like 5 spots of something else, then assume they could be swapped around within their tiers and I probably wouldn't even notice. The gap between a lot of these is very small. Also feel free to tab out and look at something else while this runs in the background, because this video will not have much to look at beyond a glorified slideshow. That'll save me a lot of time from having to re-download all these episodes. Now yes, you could call that lazy, but sorry, you're gonna have to repeat that. I couldn't quite hear you over the sound of the video releasing this year. That's about all there is to it, so now let's begin with a handful of songs that I don't really care much for. Don't know how surprising or controversial this is going to be, but my least favourite Death Battle track is Kings of Infinity. It starts kinda well with a super foreboding entrance for Thanos, and then drops off the face of the earth completely. For a fight between characters on the level of Thanos and Darkseid, I'd want the music underscoring it to be really grand, epic, really get across the scale of this conflict. Instead, it's super slow and monotonous, and the vocals aren't nearly as impactful as I'd want. I don't know if it's because of the delivery or because it's been memed, but I genuinely almost started laughing at one of the 7 Gorgillion times I'm the King gets uttered. At the very least I can say it starts to pick up a little bit of momentum towards the end, but by that point it's too little too late. This was an easy last place pick. It might have more I like than some of the others in this tier, but those ones are at least only around 3 minutes long. Kings of Infinity is more than 6, so it just drags on and on with nothing to hook me for most of it. All the more power to you if you like it, but it is not for me at all. Webbed Wings perfectly fits its episode in that it completely lacks energy and drains all the joy from my soul. Much like the fight's dialogue, it feels like it takes itself way too seriously and thinks it's far more BA badass than it actually is. How do you fuck up so badly by having the main motif be the Danny Elfman Batman theme repeated to infinity when neither of these characters is Batman? Like, for God's sake, Boomstick literally has a line in the analysis saying how Batgirl deserves recognition separate from her connection to Batman. It gets slightly more energetic in the second half, but not nearly enough to make me like it. Sirens of Combat couldn't even be bothered spelling combat with a K. That's like the one thing I would have wanted to get any serotonin from how dreadfully boring this song is. Battle at Zook Zoo gets points for its hilariously generic name being funny to apply to other tracks. Imagine if we got Battle in Space, or Battle in the Arena, or Battle in a lot of places. The rest of the track is no less generic, taking a few neat riffs and then repeating them ad nauseum, and it just gets boring after a bit. Also, around the 1 minute 16 second mark, they did this weird flickering effect with one of the instruments that sounded actively unpleasant and got rid of any chance I had of letting this coast into C tier, with another similar though less bad instance of it happening near the end. Not a fan. Beyond 2099 has a cool electric guitar going off in the background at one point, everything else was entirely in one ear and out the other. Instead of describing Devil of the Night with every adjective I've used to call the last few tracks boring, I'll say that this was probably the most set up to fail. Even under normal circumstances, a generic superhero action score would struggle to win me over. Much less after following the triple whammy of Watch Out Samurai, Chorus of Carnage, and Wings of Iron. It never stood a chance. While Blood on Broken Glass isn't as slow as its contemporaries in the bottom tier, it is every bit as uninteresting and repetitive, which stops me from getting into it. Doesn't help that it shares an episode with Olympus Mons, so it gets outshined even harder. American Phantom is a song that never starts. It opens setting a nice atmosphere, then doesn't pick up nearly enough to match how hectic the latter portions of the fight could get. In an ideal world, I would have loved something to match the level of energy that something like What's Up Danger brought. Well, that was short and painless. But before we get to the real bangers, we gotta get through the C tier tracks. Some of which I like, none of which I feel too strongly towards. Nem hyped up Thunder of Wonder as this overlooked banger, and now here I am thinking it's just okay. Outside of the DCEU Wonder Woman theme, which I have no real affinity for, a lot of it comes across as generic to me and I struggle to remember much about it. I don't dislike it though for what that's worth. Both Nem and Digital Tire heralded Satsui no Sekai is really good and underrated, but I'm sorry, I don't think I see the vision with this one. It's not bad at all, it's foreboding and the chanting adds a good bit of atmosphere. It's just a bit slow for my taste and lacks a particularly strong hook to keep me all that engaged. Happy for those who love it, I am not among them. I can respect the AC/DC style that Suit Yourself is going for, I think it does what it sets out to do well, I'm just not personally a huge fan. This style of vocals is not one that works all that well for me. Not actively unpleasant, just not something I find a whole lot of appeal in. Mad respect for ending with a Danny Elfman Batman theme to throw off the tinfoilers though. Could not have picked a better episode to do that with given how much it was debated during the lead up. You Have Failed the City is not a bad track, but it's also not my thing while seeming very out of place for a match like Green Arrow vs Hawkeye. I might not be too into the vocals here, but I do like the pace of it better than Suit Yourself, which lets it rank a little higher. Maybe I should show it to my dad though, I think he'd really like it. Apex of Doom is as interesting as it is bad, which is to say it's neither. It matches the animation in being perfectly okay, not sparking any strong feelings one way or the other. Some of the techno sounds are pretty nice and give it points, but most of it does little to capture my interest. It does the job it needs to do, it's just that job doesn't require it to be all that exciting in context or out of it. Red Winter is one of the hardest ones for me to rank, because on one hand it serves its role in its episode very well. It isn't a standout by any means, but it does what your typical action score needs to do and knows when to slow down to build tension. On the other hand, listening to it on its own makes me go honk shoe. If I was to focus on one aspect over the other, then it would either be way higher or way lower. So let's meet in the middle and say it's alright, how does that sound? Considering it's in the worst episode represented on this list by a country mile, I'm shocked that I Am All of Mewtwo ranked so relatively high up. Would I necessarily call it good? It's kinda just a mashup of I Am All of Me and the Gen 1 Pokemon encounter theme with little of its own identity, and doesn't go half as hard as other tracks that attempt the same kind of thing. Credit where it's due though, I do like the songs that it's mashing together, and it does have some level of pace and energy to it, unlike the animation it's attached to and most of what I have ranked below it. It's perfectly okay, and I wouldn't strongly object to listening to it. Doesn't sound like much of a compliment, but Shadow vs Mewtwo's gotta take the closest things to W's it can get. It took an embarrassing amount of time for me to clock the joke in the title of Thank God It's Halloween. It's effective enough in terms of setting a creepy atmosphere. It's not the kind of thing I go out of my way to listen to on its own, but it's also not supposed to be. I like it fine enough for what it is. If It Bleeds is a decent enough action score with some fairly suspenseful parts, and also some bits that sound more mystical like what I'd expect from a Star Wars score. Might be a little ill-fitting for a non-Force user like Boba, but I think it helps to add a bit more flavour to this one. I also really like the hopeful sounding bit as Fett walks off towards the sun at the end. Madness in Venom works for what it wants to be and what the fight needs. It's creepy, it's spooky, I like the This Is Halloween bit, it does what it sets out to do, just not in a way that leaves me wanting to put it on loop or anything. Princess is a Wonder sounds nice enough, and I like when it syncs with She-Ra's sword swings breaking the gauntlets, but nothing too crazy or memorable that gives me any strong desire to go back to it. A Mocking Heaven's a decent track that I don't really remember all that often. It's mildly enjoyable and I have nothing else to say about it. I like Ride Into Hell enough, but I struggle to remember much about it aside from it being heavier than I would have expected. It's a little repetitive with a main beat that doesn't stick with me, and the lack of vocals means it was fighting an uphill battle from the get-go. Fun to listen to in the moment though. Titans of Magic is okay. The bell is cool, the melody's alright, it's decent, not much else to say. Aside from You Have Failed This City, Blood Moon is the track I could most easily imagine hearing my dad listening to on the radio. It seems right up his alley. Me personally, again, the more guttural vocals don't play as well to my taste, but it does fit a lot better here than in Green Arrow vs. Hawkeye. I can appreciate it telling the struggles of a man trying not to lose himself to his inner beast, and the chorus is fully win me over, but I don't find this to be one I want to go back to all that often. I totally get the hype I've seen around it though. The 20-second portion of Fight is Won and Not Actual Size is the most joy I felt throughout the entirety of Ant-Man vs. Atom. It's amazing. The rest of it's alright. It works for what's needed of it in every scene, just not too terribly engaging to listen to outside of the one excellent portion that let it rank way higher than it would have otherwise. This song's also what got me to out myself as being able to immediately recognise the MCU Ant-Man theme to my friends. What an embarrassing blunder. What aren't embarrassing blunders are the B-tier tracks. On to the ones I really like now. I don't know what it is about Days of Booster Pass that worked for me enough to get this high. I feel like by all accounts I should consider this generic, but I liked it just enough to claw its way into B tier, and for the life of me I could not tell you why. Once you get past the opening 30 or so seconds of setup, Appetite for Greed is pretty fun. Kinda gets repetitive after a point, and the standalone releases hurt a little by the pauses and abrupt tone shifts needed for the fight, but overall it's wacky and enjoyable. I like it. Marvelous is one of the main reasons that 2020 me was one of the biggest Captain Marvel vs. Shazam apologists to ever exist. Now 4 odd years later, where I think the episode is just your standardly decent cape shit fight, the track has taken a similar dip to where I still like it, but nowhere near the extent I used to. I think it's a really cool melding of the Avengers and Justice League Unlimited theme with a heroic feel that works really well for the fight, and my opinion doesn't go a whole lot further than that. It's good and aids some really hype moments in the fight, but I wouldn't use its name as an adjective to describe it. Spellaholics Anonymous is really cool and atmospheric, if not the most exciting. I really like the chimes, and the overall song has a very mystical feel to it. The highlight is the really triumphant bit when Superman shows up. KO Computer is one of the final tracks I had to write the segment for, and frankly at this point I think I'm out of different ways to say this is pretty good but I don't have much to say about it. It is good but I don't have much to say about it. The name's a fun play on the Radiohead song. I like the jazzy sound of Full Course well. It's fun and catchy, though I wouldn't say it hit me hard enough in terms of catchiness or dramatic weight to let it rank super high and stop itself from feeling a little repetitive by the end. I'm surprised that Frozen Fire is the Hero Waka track to work in You Say Run. I thought that would have been in Deku or All Might's episodes. Can't complain though, when it makes the ending to this a joy to listen to. And the rest ain't bad either. Though it's in a weird paradoxical state of complementing the fight better than standing on its own, but the fight it complements sucks, so I'm unfortunately not left going back to it very much. For as many faults as you can find in Aang vs. Ed, Elements of Alchemy is not among them. I don't have too much to say about it. It just sounds nice with the kind of woodwind and percussion instruments I'd expect from an Atla project, it matches the tone it needs to well, and the finale with the Avatar theme is glorious. No comment on how well it fits Ed though. Let me know in the comments if he was done better in the music department than he was in the writing. A very high bar, I know. Shonen Showdown's a fast, energetic bop, contrasted with a much slower, more dramatic ending, and I don't have much more to say on it other than I like it. I'll be honest, I don't quite understand the extent of the hype around Bizarre Stars. It's definitely a good track that I like, and it carries a lot of the energy for this boring fight, but it's also on the shorter end and doesn't hit me quite hard enough to call it amazing. Forevermore is a solid melding of the X-Men and Teen Titans themes that I quite enjoy, though it definitely doesn't always seamlessly switch between them, and it does feel a lot more focused on the X-Men side. I find myself saying That's So Phoenix more than I find myself saying the title of the Disney sitcom, despite leaning a bit too hard into the edgy side of the characters for my liking, especially that fight like the fucking devil wishes it could line, which feels a bit try-hardy. Chaos Unraveled is a good song with an especially great chorus that complements the superform transformations and final scuffle in the sky very well. I appreciate how they include All of Me and Lose Your Way in the lyrics very naturally too. My feelings on Dangerous Gaze sort of match up with my feelings on Sasuke vs. TA as a whole, just more strongly positive and without the boring bits. I hardly ever think of it, but it's enjoyable enough to go back to, and it really picks up with the ending. Fight Like a Devil has grown on me a lot recently. I wouldn't say it clicks with me to the same extent as the faster, more energetic rap tracks like What's Up Danger and Inhuman, but it's still pretty solid. It's not nearly as slow as I remember and actually aids the fight in feeling more tense, especially when it switches to the chanting during the evil Ryu transformation. Yeah, I think I slept on this one for way too long, it's really good. Do you think if Shredder fought Bane instead it would have been called Shredding Venom? I like Shredding Silver, it's got a neat samurai vibe and fits its fight well. So I hope it doesn't come across as a jab when I say that the best musical moment in the animation is when it knows to butt out and go completely silent for the death. It lets the bloody finisher set in much better and means that the score on its own doesn't need to abruptly change at the end. Oh yeah is an unfortunately short but very sweet package. This is an incredibly catchy beat and sets a fun tone fitting for a spar between friends who do this every week. The synth and record scratches weren't as noticeable in the actual episode, so it was neat to be able to pick up on them here. I like the rewinding sound for when Kool-Aid Man turns back time, and the instrumentation really fits the vibe of an old commercial in a wrestling match, though not in a way I know how to explain. It does sadly kind of fall flat a bit towards the ending. I don't think the big tonal shifts towards the end of the fight were jarring at all, but the score from the Mama Boomstick and Sarge scenes all being worked into the same track means that this ending feels kind of all over the place with a lot of pauses in different styles that don't coalesce all coming one after the other. A weak ending to an otherwise really fun listen. While on its own Goodbye Chimichanga's too all over the place for me to want to go back to, the various tonal shifts fit what's needed for the fight. The opening jazzy bit is great, the continuity gem sequence is pretty alright, the live action segment feels like what I'd expect to hear in a Blue Apron ad and I can't decide if I mean that in a positive way or not, the random incorporation of Part of Your World delighted me, and that final showdown fully playing into the Mask style of music to show his dominance as he slaughters Deadpool to the beat is excellent. Very wacky and fun stuff. Is Ocean Man the kind of track I'd seek out to listen to by itself? Not really, but it also isn't supposed to be. This one sets out to fit the various tones its fight scenes go through and does so immaculately. It manages to fit whenever it needs to be heroic and energetic for the action, quieter and slower for the character moments, or building up to an insane final clash. It uses the kind of instruments I'd associate with SpongeBob, and the bit that sounds like the Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy theme also manages to fit well for Aquaman for reasons I should hopefully not have to explain. I quite enjoy A Strange Fate. It sounds mystical and mysterious, while mainly being a rock track that doesn't drag its feet unlike the battle, and I like the more intense ending that emphasizes how fucked Strange is. I think Resident Rising's more on the underappreciated side. I really like it. The start sounds like there's a siren going off to warn of the impending zombie apocalypse. The rest of the song from then on is pretty solid, if nothing amazing, and the killer electric guitar once Frank gets in the Mr. Free suit in the last minute is when this one starts to get really great. Draconic Robotics rocks. Fits the kind of feel I'd want for a big robot kaiju fight, and the Power Rangers guitar riff helps to stop it from feeling too repetitive while giving it something to be able to identify which episode it came from. Turtle and Toad has a really neat vibe to it. The shamisen focus makes it feel more like something from the early era of these two series when things were more relatively grounded, and it helps it stand out compared to the other more extreme Dragon Ball and Naruto tracks. I can't exactly comment on how well Hero's Journey represents Chinese or Greek musical culture. I'm the last person who should be commenting on that with any kind of confidence. What I can say is that it fits the vibe the fight is going for of a retelling of a Clash of Ages from millennia ago. Not to the level of, say, Fireborn, but it's trying to balance fun and epic rather than going all in on the latter, so I think that's fine for what it's going for. Okay, so I know that Fallen Gods is infamous for I'm powerful, I punch the best being the funniest lyric ever put in a death battle track, and yeah, whether intended or not, it is. But I don't want that to take away focus from some of the other lyrics like I am the shape that shifts, mightier than any marvel, or my personal second favourite, shape-shifting my arm into a big drill, I'm harming ya. Just beautiful, brings a tear to my eye. It's not all meme lines though. I think there are some good bars in here and I enjoy the overall flow of the song. It feels like it should be too slow for me to get all that into it, but the pace surprisingly works for me. I really like the sound of the chorus especially. Those meme lines just help to make it even more memorable and funny to me. As someone who hasn't played a Crash or pre-Skylander Spyro game before, Crash and Burn fits at the very least what I know to expect from Crash's side of things. I like how it shifts to emphasize the rocking guitar when Spyro goes on the offensive, flips back to the percussion and brass when Crash brings his helicopter pack and regains the upper hand, then combines both during the climax when Spyro transforms into Dark Spyro. Admittedly, I don't think they perfectly complement each other when they play at the same time, and I might have liked it to get a bit more intense for Dark Spyro's appearance, but as is, it's still a solid way to end a really catchy and fun song. The two most common sentiments I've seen for Final Breath is that it's mainly just let the battles begin from Final Fantasy VII, and that's why it's so damn good. And I'd agree with both of those. The Final Fantasy influence does stick out to me more, though this is coming from someone who's never played a Zelda game past the first hour, so maybe they do use some more melodies and stuff that I wouldn't recognise. There are still some parts I picked up on at least. Like, I think the ocarina being worked in to play the Song of Storms is really cool, and the climax working in this dramatic chanting for the Fierce Deity transformation is awesome. though I wish the ending was a little stronger rather than just going back to let the battles begin. It works for Cloud regaining the upper hand, but it does feel like it gets toned down a lot compared to what came right before it. Stars of the Universe is a good bit better than I remember it being. Definitely better in the fight than as a standalone release, but the main melody is still really nice, the pauses feel more naturally worked in, and I think the rising intensity complements the transformations and especially the climax super well. Besides the beginning just being kind of whatever and skippable, though still fine in context, not too much to complain about. I also always forget about the little jingle at the end, which is a nice touch. Shame that I usually end up closing it during the extended period of silence. When Kung Fu Panda 4 was coming out, I rewatched the first three with my friends, and I didn't realize just how directly the ending of Dragons and Dumplings pulled from the Po vs Kai Spirit Realm fight. Doesn't make it any less glorious when Po brings out the Chi Dragon and says the thing though. Everything else sounds nice and complements what it needs to in the battle, but all the pauses and tonal shifts make it something I can't see myself seeking out independently of the fight. Ikari isn't quite as heavy as I'd like for a match like Hulk vs Broly, and it wasn't selling me on that first chorus at all. After that though, it manages to pick up quite a bit. I dig the Japanese vocals, the simplistic lyrics work for the characters, and it manages to work in some quieter bits in ways that surprisingly fit. The first one during the Green Door sequence is quite nice, and the climax being more ethereal with the violent screaming in the background works as a juxtaposition both to itself and the reality breaking it accompanies. I'm pretty sure I've slandered Kings of the Sea in the past, which was a severe and continuous lapse in my judgment. I actually really like the melody and the piano notes in the background which get more prominent in the latter portions, and the intense turn it takes towards the end in the dark depths fits super well. This has solidly gone from a track I considered mid to one where I can definitely say I dig it. I'm only going off the instrumental version of Olympus Mons since that's what was used in the episodes. And yeah, more than any other instrumental track, you can tell that this one was made with vocals in mind that were later removed. The instrumental rendition is still great though. The pipe organ's a pretty uncommon instrument to hear, so that's a cool novelty. It helps it to feel even more grand than it already did. While it doesn't fit what I'd expect from these characters, it's still a great song to listen to and gets me even more hyped during that one excellent shot where Bowser swipes towards the camera. One Winged Devil goes crazy towards the end once Sephiroth reveals the supernova. The rest of it beforehand is really good too. It's very fast paced and high in energy, though not one I have a ton to say about. I gotta give bonus points to Mind Over Matter for single-handedly keeping the film noir vibes going during the not very interesting combat. The tone changes closer to the end with the operatic singing help the ending monologue and kill feel so much more dramatic and emotional, and I am all for it. Not the kind of song to get stuck in my head or anything, but one that makes an impression, stands out, and does what it sets out to do very well. Even as someone who hasn't played much Sonic, hearing the various Sonic themes referenced in Way Past Flash was so cool, and I like that the song has its own identity without relying on those references as a crutch. The Death Battle Wiki's also telling me that the Justice League Unlimited theme's in there, but the Sonic stuff jumped out at me way more. Oh hey, another Pokemon track where it's primarily a mashup with the other character's theme. Except the Pokemon vs Digimon mashup is actually really good. I couldn't tell you why this one works so much better for me than I Am All of Mewtwo. Maybe it's because the mixing of the two series' music feels a lot more natural with a clearer vision? I don't know. All I can say is that this was a great showing for the one and only time Nate Wants to Battle composed for Death Battle, even if it doesn't stick out as much as some of the more original works. Secret Service definitely plays more into Bond's side of things than Wix, and has some pauses needed for the animation that make me less likely to listen to it on its own, but this is still such a kick-ass jazz track that really gets going by the end and plays into a super hectic and exciting climax. An absolute delight to listen to that aids its episode so much. Shorten the name down to the last two words and you'd have very little to complain about with Teenage Morphin Ninja Power. The chiptune style makes this the definitive OMG so retro death battle track. It's very upbeat and it put a smile on my face when it worked in the melodies from the main themes of both series. Much like the animation itself, I just wish it was a little longer. The lyrics to EXO are surprisingly great. When I was reading through them I thought, oh, okay, this verse here's Wolverine and this one's probably Raiden. Then I realized, wait no, these all seem like they could fit both characters from my admittedly very limited understanding. It's really well written. If only I could hear them normally because they are very difficult to make out. And for once, I feel like that's on some shoddy audio balancing rather than the usual case of me being bad at hearing things. Shame that it has to hold back what's otherwise a banger that I really enjoy listening to. I'd like to formally retract the time I said I was not that into Mad Laugh Riot outside of the context of its episodes. I've been sleeping on this one for far too long. The circus jingles perfectly fit the setting of the abandoned carnival the fight takes place in, and the rest of it has some great vocals from Furukachi Mana and solid lyrics that sell the character's madness without feeling too tryhardy all that often. Still nowhere near a favourite, but I've come around to loving this one. Oh damn, we're getting into the 8th years already with still over 50 songs left to go. Time to get into the really amazing stuff. They synced the It Was Me line up with the Flash vs Quicksilver callback. That alone shot this up a few spots. Otherwise, I love Reverse Rosé. I just don't have a ton to say about it. Not one of the episode's standout elements, but given the episode it's a part of, I can hardly call that a flaw. The Elvis vibe helps Jailhouse Rocket stand out a lot from every other track on the list. It's good vibes all the way through. Every time I listen to it, I am indeed having a blast. The name is also top tier. While Alive does have some of those same audio balancing problems I mentioned for EXO, I think the foundation is stronger here to where I don't mind as much. Helps that the lyrics are easier for me to decipher here. This song brings the hype for a fight that should have felt like a much bigger deal than it did. And because it only plays over part of the animation, it means it gets to fit where it needs to, while the full standalone release gets to exist as its own thing. I don't even mind the rap segment, even if it is the weakest part of the song to me. While I really like the rocking portions of 100%, it's the violin and the way it gets all staticky for the unknown percent transformation that really get it to stick with me. Excellent all around. Another Ganon track with another pipe organ, except this time it fits. I'm not explaining why that works for Dracula, figure it out. The Dark Lords works really well as a rock track for the battle portions, it's great. But it's the way the organ and the choir aid the gothic tone of the fight that let this rank as high as it did. Very impressive how the guitar and drum never completely outpaced it to make it sound cluttered, while also not going so slow as to be boring. It hits that sweet spot. If Black Widow vs Widowmaker has one fan, it's me. If it has 0 fans, I've perished. I will remain this episode's strongest soldier until the day I drop dead, and the same applies for its track. Widow's Kiss works really well for the spy vibe it wants to go for, sacrificing excitement for atmosphere, which I think it does better than most others in its season. And while it does sometimes feel a little too slow for the action going on, I think the ending picks up the slack there. Am I more biased in this placement than I am with a lot of the others? Probably. There is no second part to that sentence. Gods of Destruction conveys feelings of grandeur and importance exceptionally well. It really gets across that these two characters are at the top of their food chains, and that their clash means bad news for any poor sap that gets caught within the same galaxy. The chanting at the end is exactly what I wanted from a Beerus track, and further enhances one of the best scenes in its season. A lot of what I said about Gods of Destruction can also be applied to All Consuming. Very grand, very epic, makes the fight feel like a big deal, basically what I wanted from Kings of Infinity. It's outdone by plenty of its contemporaries in its season, but don't let that take away from how good it is on its own merits. Without repeating too much of what I'll say about the first, I think the Synthetic Orchestra's theme for Goku vs Superman 2 is awesome. It's a nice alternate take having the song play faster, and it feels very special to have it over the opening credits. Though the slower pace of the first and the additional surprise factor helped that one to feel like an even bigger event. I feel like Wiz and Boomstick has reached a similar level of iconicity as Invader now. It's a very solid track that always gets me in the mood for a new episode, and I never find myself getting tired of it. Top 1 episodes carried by its track. Number 1, well okay, there are 2 others left to go over from episodes I don't like, though Blake vs Mikasa has more I like than just Thundershroud, so I don't know if that... Not the point. What matters right now is that Lost Ice Storms is really good. Fair play if you don't think it fits the characters, I honestly wouldn't be able to tell you. What I can tell you is that I love both the instrumentals and the vocals for this song. Given how I felt towards some of the lower rated ones, you'd be surprised to hear that Brandon's guttural vocals actually work a bit better for me than his normal ones in this song. But it's Miriani who especially stands out to me. She knocked it out of the park. Love the build up at the start too, as well as how it's used during the ending with it muting when time stops, kicking back in when Grey breaks through, freezing again when he does, and then ending with one last line from Miriani representing Esdeath as she walks away. Also, this isn't in the script because it only started recently, but me and another friend of mine find it really funny to quote the "You must be out of your mind" lyric because we just find the delivery really funny. Okay, now I can move on to the next segment. Can't say I was expecting Change of Heart to rank this high, but it's a highlight of its episode to me. It's as catchy as it is energetic, and the flickering sound when the Iron Sand Kaiju shows up is really cool, as opposed to what Battle at Zook Zoo was going for, which hurt my ears. Any references or callbacks are lost on me though, even more so than most other series on the show that I haven't experienced much of, which is a shame because the Death Battle Wiki's telling me there's quite a few. Retro Rivals is the part of this episode that most feels like a celebration of the characters. It works in a ton of references to motifs from Mario and Sonic's home series, while escalating from a more chill tone at the start to the dramatic final clash. It tries to balance a lot and pulls it off with grace, all coming together to form a cohesive song that's incredibly fun to go back to. The battle portions of Breathless Blade sound great, matching this high-spirited battle of wits very well, but I gotta bring special attention to the start and end. Those strings sound beautiful. They fit the somber ending especially perfectly, and I love the dramatic sting at the end when Nezuko hesitates to take Jonathan's hand. I love the use of rock guitar and shamisen in Force and Lightning. They don't strike me as the kind of instruments that would go that well together, and yet they both sound so good in this. Plus they have a really good pace for the battle scenes. What really stands out to me though are the violins. They build the tension really well when needed leading up to the fight and final clash, and especially during the genjutsu scene. They cut out at the perfect time as well. Hell Over Heaven has a few less interesting portions, but otherwise is a phenomenal song with enough energy behind it to keep my head banging most of the way through, while having some slower and creepier parts with the drum beat sounding like a heartbeat, which is really cool. It's intense, atmospheric, and as unsurprisingly excellent as you'd expect from Dio vs Alucard's. Damn, I knew What's Up Danger was good, but it only just hit me on this go around how much I love it. The lyrics are quick and snappy, the vocals complement each other nicely, and I really like the dramatic ending as the two finish off in sync with each other. Though I did think the line, "You are not even the best character in the movie Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse compared to the rest of the cast, I would personally say I'm more of a fan of Spider-Ham," was a little clunky and wordy, but what can you do? Thundershroud's the best part of Blake vs Mikasa, you say? Slow down now, can't just be dropping controversial takes like that out of the blue. Yeah, this isn't quite one of my favourites of all time like it seems to be for so many. There are one or two line deliveries that sounded slightly flat, and it doesn't always balance the two vocalists perfectly, but those are nitpicks in the grand scheme of things. How much do I really need to say to sell you on this one? The vocals are fantastic from both Agiko and Tiggs. It fits when it needs to enhance the action or be more dramatic. It matches what I'd expect from what I've heard of Ruby and Attack on Titan. It's beloved for a reason. Phenomenal track. Is Infection Perfection still a fan favourite? I never see anyone talking about it now compared to a few years ago. Either way, I love this one. I always forget how much I enjoy it until I go back and listen to it again. It's a stellar industrial metal song with equally great lyrics about how these two mechanical monsters are set out to remake the whole world in their image. The distortion on some of the vocals further emphasises the danger they pose. I've heard the instrumental for Strongest Alive plays heavily into the Black Clover side of things, which is good since the lyrics favour the Hiroaka side a lot more with the callbacks to Mighty and Marvel for All. I really love this one. It's rocking and energetic and feels like a natural follow-on for Mighty without blatantly plagiarising it. While Mighty gives the vibe of someone who'll carry the weight of the world on his shoulders and not break a sweat while saving the day, Strongest Alive's lyrics come across more as the less experienced successor who'll make sure you as a person are doing alright as he tries his best to overcome the danger in front of him. Easily the best part of the episodes. Falcon Uncaged is hype, and I think that's about all the justification you need for it to place up here. High energy, catchy beat complements its fight very well. Its simplicity is outmatched only by how fun it is to listen to. Who Wears the Crown is sadly on the shorter end, but it packs a lot of memorable stuff into that runtime. The instrumentals and the vocals from Therewolf and Chick Named D are great for most of it, but it's towards the end where Makima shoots Gojo when the electric guitar starts shredding like crazy that this starts to really stand out. The wind down during Hollow Purple was really well handled too. Having Winter Sonata as my preferred of the two Ruby tracks can't be the popular opinion, right? I see a ton of love going around for Thundershroud, but not nearly as much for this. Well, I love it a ton. It's so elegant in a way that sticks out from any of its contemporaries, and I like the quieter bits when they need to build up something or take a breather. Listening to the Metal Lotus again reminded me that between the song and the episode, the Rose of Nature line gets a lot of references to it. Can't say I'm complaining though. That song bangs, as does this one. It's a really high energy metal song with cool lyrics about how these two aren't fully man or machine. I like how that applies in a different way to each character. It matches the fight animation in that it isn't trying to be super complex or anything. All it wants to be is a simple, fast-paced, exciting thrill ride, and it succeeds at that with flying colours. I vividly remember one of my first times listening to it thinking, wait, this sounds like it's still going strong and I'm sure it's been over 3 minutes by now. Is it not about to wind down? Then I checked the video bar and it was seconds away from stopping, which it fittingly does quickly rather than slowly petering out, which I greatly appreciate. Real ones remember when I ranked Emerald Heroes as my second favourite death battle track, and even realer ones will pretend that they don't. I still adore this track. The subdued vocals sound fantastic and I love how it slows and picks up to accommodate the pace of the battle. The guitar riffs when Heat Blast first shows up constantly get stuck in my head. The tonal shift when Alien X gets brought out works wonders, and I still can't get over how hype it is when it starts to fade out, only to come back in full swing when Hal wills himself back into reality. The ending does kinda blow unfortunately, which stops it from hanging with the top tiers. Right after the best bit is when it starts to drag out as it winds down, with not much to make me want to stay instead of skipping to the next song in the playlist early. But everything else is so good that I can't drop it down much lower than this. Wobble Ubba Alonzi drops the ball on a perfectly good portmanteau for the name served to it on a silver platter. Track's a banger though. Plenty of wibbly wobbly sci-fi sounds that fit both series and give it a unique tone, and the choir at the end is incredible. Something fantastic. An episode as one-sided and uninteresting in concept as Korra vs Storm did not need a track that goes this hard. But Weathering the Elements decides to go all out for some reason and give the animation a really grand and epic feeling. Whether it needs to be dramatic, ethereal, or just fit the tone of two forces of nature clashing, it sounds gorgeous and majestic from beginning to end, with a melody that gets stuck on my head for ages every time I listen to it. Without a doubt the biggest surprise banger of its season, and maybe even the whole show. Princess of Pride is a fantastic Viking metal song that manages to maintain a consistently high level of energy and excitement to distract from how one-sided the animation is. Love how it sounds like it's about to end to aid the fake out, and the winding down for the final shot is especially cool. Megamania is very catchy and fun and all that, but once you realise how the opening drop could pass as a sped up retro version of the Nostalgia Critic theme, you'll never unhear it. I certainly haven't been able to for the last 4 years anyway. Bro, Final Former slaps! They were defeating the Decepticons with this one. I don't know how to vocalise the talking head and fire emojis, but trust me, they're there. This was apparently intended to be like a villainous counterpart to Wings of Iron, and while I don't prefer it over that one like I thought I used to, this is still an amazing showing that lives up to that legacy. Great vocals, rocking instrumentation, the tonal shift is the only part of the Golden Freezer transformation that I like. It's a banger. Like a wise man once said while forgetting to mute himself in a Discord call, Inhuman is straight up fire. Much like Sparks and Swat's previous work on What's Up Danger, I'm really into the flow and pace of this song, and I think the vocals are a bit better here. Omega Sparks playing the part of Alex has this growl to his voice that lets him tell the malice and aggression of the character, contrasting against Swat's as Cole in a way that lets it feel like the characters themselves are the ones singing despite how different the voices are. And I live for the slower parts telling the impact of big moments in the fight like the rooftop scuffle and sky jump towards the end. Hedge of Tomorrow is as good as I'd expect for a series with such consistently amazing music as Sonic and Dragon Ball. This song's an adrenaline rush that goes hand in hand with the exhilarating combat and the animation to really get the blood pumping. I found that it complemented the moon toss especially well. I love the slower and more dramatic ending in the Eternal Time Labyrinth too. Brandon and Logan also did a phenomenal job on the vocals. Even though not all of the screechier segments worked that well for me, it's still some impressive stuff that I think works in tandem with the rest of the vocals. I've mentioned before, but I absolutely love when a song in a series can work in previous songs, and working in Goku and Vegeta's previous tracks while still giving this one its own identity is the perfect way to go about the song for the fight between their fusions. It's a phenomenal rock song with perfectly fitting lyrics that I love wholeheartedly, and I appreciate the episode distorting it and emphasising the Chala head chalas towards the end. If I had any complaints, it's that I wish it picked up in intensity a little rather than remaining on the same level for the climax as it does for everything else. But that's not enough to stop me from going back to this one over and over again. Thank you Dragon Dance for being the one shining beacon to stop this from being the most boring death battle of all time in my eyes. That's No Moon, beyond its perfect name, is such a beautiful melancholic piece of music. It fits the more moody tone of the fight exceptionally well, while never getting to the point where it feels like it's too slow for the action it's playing over. I also love how it incorporates Brandon's Uchiha theme and the Imperial March in more subtle ways. I didn't even pick up on that until this go around, which only made me appreciate it more. It's not a banger in the traditional sense of being super catchy and getting me to bang my head, but I still love going back to it, whether on its own or to see how it enhances one of the best fights in modern death battle. Four Fist Death Punch just does not let up. Good God. For almost the entire duration, this is an adrenaline rush that works in plenty of fun nods to Pokemon tracks and the one Mortal Kombat song people remember. Even the more dramatic, less energetic bit towards the climax is still pretty good and fits what its scene needs it to be. This one never fails to get the blood pumping. I was hoping to put Kings of Iron in with the top tiers, but its short length and less exciting way of petering out by the end do hold it back a bit. Also, I don't know if this is just me, but there's a bit near the start where it sounds like it's suddenly jumping from one part of the song to the next as if a couple seconds got cut out in post. Slight blemishes on one of the catchiest, most energetic tracks in the series' history. One that I can't help but tap my foot to every time I hear it. The techno beat is perfection. Makes the already great fight it's attached to so much more enjoyable to revisit. A worthy addition to the top 20 that falls a hair below the S tiers, which we can get onto now and wrap this video up. I didn't realise until writing the script just how different the standalone release of God's Hand is compared to the version used in the episodes. A lot of the vocals are cut from Guts vs. Dimitri's animation, which is a shame, but I do think it was necessary for some parts to not drown out the characters talking. Definitely would recommend listening to it on its own, because if you've only heard it in the fight, you're missing out on half of what makes the song so fantastic. The high note Logan hits on the word despair and the lyrics at the end showing Dimitri's newfound respect for Guts are both big parts of what carried this past the A tiers. Regardless of where you listen to it though, this is an amazing metal song that works much better for me than I would have expected. The delivery of Guess We'll Let the Steel Decide still tickles my brain. Goku vs. Superman by the Synthetic Orchestra primarily ranks this high because of how it's used in the episodes. For all you newer Death Battle fans, you gotta realize that this was the first episode to not open with Invader. The epic orchestral music playing over the special opening credits really helps to get across the feeling that this was more than your average new Death Battle episodes. It was an event, the likes of which no other episode, even the ones I like best, better have been able to replicate. Stronger Together doesn't seem like the kind of track that should rank this high, since it's a more simple mixing of the two series themes, with the Power Ranger side standing out to me a good bit more. I guess that's the power of taking two great songs, mixing them together in a way that keeps a consistently high level of excitement and fast pace, and ending with an absolutely killer guitar shred over Matt Pat reminding everyone that he can act. Listening to this never fails to get me pumped up, and it's a big part of why this fight and its ending stand among my favourites in all of Death Battle. Ego Death perfectly establishes the dismal tone of the start, and the synth during the battle portions is incredibly catchy. I do wish the segment after Magneto hears Tetsuo's plea was a little more intense, but there are other segments that more than pick up that slack. The choir building up to the dramatic reveal of the baby and the intense turn it takes towards the end are both chilling, and the sudden drop following the Mercy Kill is a good way to show that Tetsuo met a swift and painless end. Chorus of Carnage creates without a doubt the most effective horror atmosphere ever set by a Death Battle track. The strings are haunting, the sharp piano notes make it even creepier, and the chiming of the bells during the "It's Raining You're Bleeding" scene, which syncs with Carnage's dialogue, is bone-chilling. I'd even say I like the original version more than the remaster. Less is more sometimes. Even the most die-hard Carnage vs. Lucy haters agree that this song is phenomenal. Blood Gotch Bedlam is easily the best part of this episode. It's such a lively and hectic track, fitting for a team battle on this scale with these idiots. The first bit's great, but it really picks up when the teams properly face off. I love how the audio at the end bounces between headphones to sync with a sniper shot doing the same, and then closing things off with the melody from Contact. You can't do this to me, I'm in shambles. The episode may be flawed as hell, but the track sure isn't. I will die alone on the hill of it being one of my favourites. Wings of Iron is to Death Battle what the Lion King soundtrack is to Disney. I'll go ages without listening to it, think to myself, yeah, I remember this being pretty good, I guess. And then I go back to it and it just blows me away. The lyrics aren't the easiest for me to make out, but I can deal with it when the song is so energetic and fun. It has me banging my head even just thinking about it without actually listening to it. It captures that same 80s rock feel as a Transformers movie soundtrack, which is a huge compliment. I love it so damn much, and I feel like I haven't given enough credit to it over the years for how good it really is. For how short Watch Out Samurai is, it's impressively well paced while being split into 3 distinct segments. The start is super catchy and feels more casual since neither see the other as too much of a threat at this point. Once the bridge has been tilted and we get the pause for the jump good joke, it starts to get a little more intense as the fighters get more serious, before the third segment at the very end slowly creeping in as the result of the one-stroke duelers reveals. It's fun and fits the dramatic weight of every scene perfectly, only sort of stumbling with the Samurai Jack theme at the end, which did not need to be included here. That might have knocked this otherwise perfect track down a few spots, but not enough to deny it its rightful place in the S tier. Despite its short length, it makes the best use of its limited time and proves itself to be one of Death Battle's all-time greats, just like the episode itself. Hearts of Light used to be an easy addition to my top 10. Not that I've fallen off it, which should hopefully be clear by how high it still ended up. The rest of seasons 8 through 10 just didn't let up, producing a ton of all-timers. Either way, Hearts of Light is a crucial part of what's kept Yoda vs. Mickey as one of my favourite episodes. It plays into the more operatic and mystical sounds I associate with the Star Wars prequels, and the kind of magic I associate with Disney and what little I know of Kingdom Hearts. The start opens on such a grand note, the middle chunk is very exciting, and that ending is one for the ages. Having a dramatic rendition of Yoda's theme play when he has Mickey on the back foot, then transitioning into simple and clean when Mickey fires back in a way so seamless that I didn't even recognize it was pulling from 2 different pieces of music. Oh my god, it's amazing. Gives me chills even to this day, and is the perfect way to back up the best use of an iconic quote in any Death Battle to date. Okay, so this is going to sound crazy given that I've gassed up Saitama vs. Popeye as my favourite episode of all time prior to Billcord, but I cannot believe I slept on Balderdash for so long. I always thought it was amazing, but I didn't know if I'd quite call it top tier. While re-listening to it, I think it more than earns its spot in the top 10. I am in love with the guitar in this one. It sounds right at home with the kind of music I'd expect from One Punch Man, which is one of my favourite OSTs of all time. I also love how it changes to a lower bitrate for the OMG So Retro segment, and adds a choir in the background for the Nintendo Hire This Man segment. My favourite bit though is the ending. I love how it slows down for Saitama's emotional realisation and takes its time before one last burst of energy for the final clash. And the best thing this track did was not be a culmination of the music from across the entire animation. I'm so glad that the opening and ending weren't slapped onto the song's standalone release, because that would have been so weird and ill-fitting. As it is, they already balance like 4 different tones perfectly. We don't need any more. My bias and personal attachment might be what carries Meta vs. Carolina into my top 10 favourite episodes, episodes, but Slingshot didn't need that same preferential treatment to rank this highly here. This one has some gorgeous vocals whenever Carolina takes the edge, speaking of putting souls to rest as if she was talking to the husk of what once was her teammate. And then when Meta gains the upper hand, the vocals stop as the instruments get a bit more intense, which fits the mute menace perfectly. It feels super balanced in that way, even though they're both from the same series, so they only needed to replicate one style of music. All the more reason for this to be one of my favourites. Pointing out an element of Scooby vs Courage that's good is like pointing out a cloud in a British sky. Obvious to anyone with functional senses, and there are so many that it would take forever to note them all individually. Still, gotta give props to Forever Terror Night for being an all-timer for Death Battle. The main rock bits are catchy, Chick Named Dean nails the vocals, and the switches to tense horror score, guttural demonic screeching, and the banjo playing us out at the end work better into the flow of the song better than most others that try a similar thing. Nothing to fault here. Go listen to it and get it stuck in your head for weeks at a time just like I have. I love the sirens blaring over parts of Diabolical Invincible Me. Makes it feel like a warning that these two have finally dropped the good guy act and are cutting loose, with lyrics that get across how little they think of those around them. This is one of the tracks most heavily edited between the standalone release and its inclusion in the episode, and it works wonders in both roles. It starts out with a very similar vibe to the song Tom Tom that was used in Invincible Season 1 when Nolan tore apart the Flaxen Planet, except I actually like this song even more, and the ending over Homelander's temper tantrum and Nolan shutting him up feel just as sinister as I'd like, with the vocals remaining at the same level of intensity as they were at before, since these are characters who are at their scariest when they're cold, calculating, and calm. The only L this one takes is the stupid clunky name, which obviously had no sway in the actual rankings. Everything else is phenomenal. Remember when me listening to Hollow Dreams 10 times before its episode release was the outlier? Yeah, this song still kicks so much ass. I like the build up at the start, and then when the guitar and drums fully kick in, I'm hooked all the way through. Especially for that sick as hell guitar when Madara fights off the Hado 99. The vocals are top tier as well. The delivery of the whole world bending the knee in particular hits me in all the right ways. Not much to say other than this is catchy and energetic enough to have me bobbing my head all the way through to the end. I'd like to once again point out all the nice things I said about the cinematic feeling of Weather the Elements, to say that One King to Rule Them All makes it sound like a literal coughing baby in comparison. This track has such a grand feel to it, matched by few others, conveying the overbearing power and dominance of both characters on a biblical scale. It sells the idea that these two are dueling for control over all the land around them, never letting up with the intensity, bringing a level of awe that I struggle to do justice with words, and contributing heavily to some of my favourite moments in the show's history. Fireborn was a very pleasant surprise. I did not expect the fan choir song to turn out this well. The vocals all harmonise near perfectly, the way the lyrics flow tickle my brain in just the right way, and for as good as the a cappella version is, which isn't being ranked here, I think the drums and strings in the background add a lot to it. The lack of electric instruments feels very appropriate given the series in question. My favourite part though has to be where they briefly slow down following the lightning clash, gradually building up as they ready the Dawnbreaker and Moonlight Greatsword, then crescendoing as their final duel begins. I've listened to it more times during its episode's waiting period than almost any other, and I've listened to it again since then more times than I can count. It's one of the greatest things to ever come from this show. Discordant Decipher is potentially the track to have the biggest stranglehold on me for the first day I had access to it. 10 loops of Hollow Dreams, 20 for Fireborn. I stopped keeping count for this one, but I know it was 30 at the bare minimum. The techno beat is arguably the catchiest one on the list. It's hard for it to not get stuck in my head. Brandon and Mr. Goatee also deliver vocals that feel more like the characters than in any other Death Battle track, delighting me even more to hear the two talking shit at each other. I can't help but smile at lines like, "You've got a stupid hat," and "looks like someone made you in the dark," which are so charming in a silly way. And other lines like, "For an isosceles you sure can be more than a bit obtuse," are genuinely really clever. Then you have special editions like the backwards message and maniacal laughter to give this song so much personality in a way that few others can hold a candle to. I maybe wouldn't have put in the fart joke, but next to every other amazing aspect of this song, that is a footnote. The weakest part of Super is the segment where Goku goes Ultra Instinct, and if the rest of the track was on that level of quality, it still would have made it into S tier. This feels to me like one of the most complete songs in the Death Battle OST. I can split it into 3 distinct acts. The fun and casual opening, the more intense portion where both stop holding back, and the finale where both charge their final do or die attack. And yet, no matter what tone it takes, it never loses that feeling of a good-spirited spar where both Goku and Superman want to push each other to their limit. Most of the lyrics are very clearly sung from Goku's perspective, which some may see as giving him too much focus, but I don't really mind. This is his fight after all. He's the one who wants to actively challenge himself and help Superman cut loose. Clark is just humouring him, so having the lyrics reflect that is fine by me. Plenty of the more descriptive ones do apply to them both anyway, and they're delivered with impeccable vocals. Superman does get more representation for his side in the instrumental anyway, with some more heroic motifs to balance out the Dragon Ball-esque rock sound making up most of it. This song never lets up in pure exhilaration, and it has one of the most effective build-ups to its big finale of anything on the list. Both characters are now putting everything they have on the line as the most peaceful section of the music crescendos to its peak intensity, and I struggle to think of any other moment in any of these songs that made my face light up quite like the line "Watch me come alive" playing over a sun-dipped Superman charging towards Earth through a Kamehameha, harkening back to both previous rounds at the same time. And that final chorus gives me chills. It's got this feeling of finality to help set it apart from almost any other track in the series, correcting the one issue I had with Dragon Dance. This is to that song what One King to Rule Them All was to Weathering the Elements. Super is a masterpiece that plays to my sensibilities perfectly. Every single element of it comes together to make something even greater than the sum of its parts. So what could possibly surpass it? For at least the last 4 years now, Mighty has remained my favourite death battle track of all time. This was the first one that Brandon and Therewolf collaborated on, and what a hell of a showing it was. I cannot get over how well every single bit of this song works for me. The triumphant, heroic sound of the instrumental helping to build on the positive and friendly tone set by the characters complementing each other. The genuinely inspiring and perfectly fitting lyrics that describe the characters' mindsets and how they've prepared their successors for when they can no longer continue fighting the good fight. The wind down for the fake out before the Night Guy transformation where it comes back in full swing with this phenomenal guitar shred from Therewolf. Now completely devoid of any lyrics as the two were throwing caution to the wind and giving everything their all, almost single-handedly making this one of the best lead-ins to any death battle kill. It aids its episode more than any other song in death battle since they stopped using copyrighted music, and it slaps hard as hell in its own merits too. Everything about this song is perfect in my eyes and I can't get enough of it. So there you go, all 118 death battle tracks ranked. Overall, they're consistently great and you should go show the artists some support. Both the musicians and the people making the track art, which I don't praise enough because it's consistently very, very good. Whether that's on their death battle stuff or their original works. The whole Rooster Teeth closure situation kinda screwed them over too by forcing Brandon and Therewolf's uploads of the tracks to be taken down and republished, killing all their momentum and forcing them to start from square one in terms of views. So go help them get those back up so they can keep doing cool music stuff. Their channels will be linked in the description. I don't have much of an outro planned, so I'll wrap this up and go back to working on my last couple of videos I got planned for the rest of the year. Whether or not you check those out when they release, thanks for sticking through the whole of this video at the very least. Hopefully see you around for the next one.